Welcome back to Chow Time Pod. It's your host Red. I got a video today from Decran Red. You know, Grammar Red has been making a lot of videos, and this video really kind of like touched upon something that I really want to talk about. Is the man should be served the meal first. That concept is so lost now in the West, but it's such an important concept, and I don't think very many people understand why it is. So let's go over it, and please subscribe down below. I really appreciate that, and let's get to that chow time.
I want to tell you why, when I was a child and my mother was a child and my grandmother was a child, why men always ate first.
Again, foreign concept nowadays. Women don't even give a fuck about feeding us first or anything, and they're just all in themselves, and they're gonna eat or whatever.
Now, back in those days, men normally had hard jobs.
This is true.
They worked all day and they came home and there was always a hot meal on the table. Now, back then, everyone sat down at the table to eat. We didn't sit in front of a television. We sat at the table. The table was set nicely. Sometimes there was a prayer said, sometimes not. But a man's plate was always fixed first. And that's because he needed the calories more than anyone else. But there's another reason. He was fixed a plate first as a show of respect for his authority as the head of the household.
I learned this when I was young. You know, my mother always served my father first, made sure he got the first batch of each of the food. And I've always asked her, why do we need to do this? It's like, because your dad is the head of the house. We need to respect that he's the head of the house. So he needs to eat first because he works the hardest. And as a kid, that made total sense to me. Both my parents worked very hard. I'm not saying that my mom didn't work as hard as my dad, but my dad did the extra because he carried a lot more of the leadership load, in a sense. He took care of the business. He took care of all the finances. He took care of, paying the bills and all that stuff. They both worked very hard and both made money together. But my mom always made sure she knew what he liked to eat that day. And if my dad didn't have a choice that day, then she would ask me or my brother and sister, well, your dad doesn't seem to want anything in particular. Do you guys want anything in particular? Or sometimes my dad will want something and she'll make him that just for him and then make something different for the kids. Why? Because sometimes we don't like what dad likes because, we have different taste buds. And I grew up so respectful because of that understanding that he eats first. And not just that. Story time. When I was younger, my dad, we eat as a family. I know it's like a different concept for a lot of Americans, but as a family, the family style, Asian family style, where there's a lot of 3-4 different entrees, and then everybody has a bowl of rice, and you pick from all the entrees, and then you're eating, right? When I was younger, I saw my dad grab the bowl of soup, and just sip out of the bowl. And I was just like, oh, okay, if my dad can do that. And then the next time something like that happened, I grabbed the bowl and drank out of this. I grabbed the soup bowl and drank out of the whole soup bowl that was made to be shared. And my mom was like, no, you don't do that. And I was just like, but dad did it. And it was like, dad did it because he is the head of the house. So he is able to do it. You are not able to do it because you're not head of the house yet. And when I was young, that really got instilled into me. It's like, oh yeah, some of these things, there is somewhat of a privilege that you're able to do some of these more not so great things, I guess. I mean, drinking out of a soup bowl isn't the best, but isn't the worst either. But yeah, it just made me realize you have to earn certain rights in the world. And getting your meal first, providing for your family is somewhat of a right that men should have, when their family's taking care of them. I'm not saying it's like you have to have it, but it was tradition back in the day, and it made us kids respect our fathers even more because that respect factor got passed down from our mothers and the way she treated our fathers. That does not happen anywhere close to that nowadays. Everybody, women are so disrespectful to their husbands. Their kids are disrespectful to their fathers because of that.
And he did sit at the head of the table.
That too.
And sometimes the mother would then start fixing the plates of the children. But as soon as children were old enough, the father passed the meat plate around to his wife. And then she passed it on to the other children, and they took their portion. Well, modern women, you can tell if there's a daddy in the home right away. You'll know if those children have manners. You'll hear them say, "My kids eat first." You're disrespecting the head of the household, which in that case, if you're single, is you.
Mm.
Now,
Boom. Like she said it. There's a lot of single mothers out there that put their kids first. And you were actually disrespecting yourself as the head of the house by feeding the kids first, which actually makes sense to me. You know, the more important people eat first, right? Just kind of how society kind of works and how it's always been. And you putting your kids above you makes it so that your kids can't respect you. And this is why your kids walk all over you for single mothers.
I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of people disagree with me on
I
this,
100% agree with you, Grandma.
but children do not need to be reared to be entitled at all.
No, they don't.
They need to learn to earn things, don't
That
they?
they do.
Also, when I was a child, I had chores, but it was nothing compared to what my mother and father had. I mean, my mother, by the time she was 4 or 5 years old, was out working in the garden. She wasn't given an allowance. There was no allowance money to be had. It's just part of living.
100%. I came here when I was 5. I've been to the donut shop almost every day since, in a sense, because my parents had to work. And when I first came here, I didn't go to school yet, so I went to work with my parents at the donut shops. And this is at this time we didn't have our own donut shop yet. And then when my parents got their own donut shop, I worked there almost every day, every weekend, doing small little tasks, doing cleaning and all this. And then when I was like 10 and able to talk to customers a little bit better, I was, grabbing donuts and doing normal server stuff at the donut shop. Did I get paid for this? Nope, never even really paid too much attention to it. All my bills were paid. I mean, I was a kid, I like there was always food for me to get like a video game. When I was a kid, I had to get straight A's in school. And that's how I earned video games. But doing chores and stuff was normal. I would cook. My mom would teach me how to cook, have me cook with her. My mom would tell me or teach me how to do the laundry, and I did the laundry for everyone in the house. I did it for my mom, my dad, my siblings, and myself. Nothing special. I never thought it was like I was supposed to get paid for any of these things. These are just things you do to help out the household. And kids are so entitled nowadays. They don't even know how to do simple basic shit like wash dishes properly or put the clothes in properly by separating the colors and shit like that.
Her mother ironed clothes all day long for a living. She worked in a wash house, and she made, I think it was 10 cents a shirt. So she worked all day long from before the sun came up until after it set, and she needed most of the calories, but she was one of those mothers who started changing the way things were, and she started feeding her children first. Well, children certainly need to be fed, but they need to show respect at a dinner table to their father. They need to show respect to their mother who prepared that meal. They need to have chores.
That they do.
It shouldn't be something you have to ask them. My sons knew as soon as they got up from the table, they had to take their own plate, they had to scrape it, whatever, put it in the compost pile, and put it in the dishwasher or wash it. They had chores to do. If they made a mess, they had to clean it up. I didn't pay them for that.
Yep.
If I make a mess, I have to clean it up. They have to learn how to live in the real world. We've got these little princesses out there
Men and
who
women.
make a mess and think the man should work all day, come home, not have anything hot on the table, and clean up after her.
Mm-hmm.
That's just wrong. Some of these old traditions should have survived.
Yep.
And the one that I think should have survived, for sure, is respect for the head of the household.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means fixing his plate first, then you need to fix his plate first.
Whew, that was always some wholesome chow from Grandma Red. Passport bros. This is why I suggest always traveling and looking for someone else. A lot of women in other countries have actual this tradition in them. My parents do. A lot of my family back in Cambodia have this exact tradition where the man gets served first. He eats at the head of the table, and he gets to do much has most control over everything. And it's not a misogynistic thing. It's not a patriarchy thing, which I'm sure most feminists are going to call it that way. It's just respect. And there's many ways you can show respect, and this is definitely one that can be instilled to you and your kids. So please subscribe down below. I really appreciate that, and I'll catch you guys next time. Ciao.